Hello, this is a video abstract on the article titled Pelvic Floor Muscle Performance, Hip Mobility and Hip Strength in Women with and Without Stress Urinary Incontinence. My name is Erin Hartigan. I'm an associate professor at the University of New England.
And my name is Adrienne McCauley. I am also at UNE, and Erin and I collaborated on the data collection and article.
So Adrienne, can you please introduce the study for us?
This study really came about from a clinical interest in observing that a lot of women with urinary incontinence also had hip impairments. And stress urinary incontinence in particular is really related to muscle imbalances, where women experience urinary leakage when there's excessive intra-abdominal pressure related to the ability for the pelvic floor muscles to control that sphincter and bladder support. So again, we really noticed clinically that the hip impairments seem to correlate, and I wanted to investigate that further to see if our observations in the clinic would stand up to the test of research.
So you found that between the two groups of women that the pelvic floor muscle function did not differ between the groups. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so this is very interesting and was a surprise to us that the pelvic floor muscle function between the groups did not differ, as you said, and it was because they were equally limited between both groups. So what we did find, however, were some differences in the hip function, and we hypothesized that perhaps those differences may be part of the reason that women who have less than optimal pelvic floor muscle function may be able to cope with that and not experience stress UI. So would you like to hear more about the differences?
I would love to.
So we have the women in the SUI group were generally older and had more number of tender points in the pelvic floor muscles. They had greater hip internal rotation range of motion in the non-dominant limb as measured in prone, and they had less flexible musculature as measured by the Ober test, and they had less hip external rotation strength measured in the seated position, and consistent with other literature, they had less strength in hip abductors measured in side lying.
So lots of comparisons in the article. Can you talk about the differences within the groups?
Yep, so we did see some non-dominant and dominant limb differences, and dominant limb was identified as that which you would kick a ball with. So the between limb differences for the SUI group, we see a unique difference within this group that seated IR strength was greater in the dominant limb. And the unique differences between limbs in the non-SUI group are that pelvic floor muscle power as measured on the dominant side was greater than the non-dominant side, and prone external rotation range of motion was less on the dominant side as compared to the non-dominant side. And there were some between limb differences consistent across both groups, and those are noted here as well, but it's the unique limb differences that we're especially interested in.
So what's the take-home message for the clinicians?
So I think the short-term take-home message is that we really need to be evaluating pelvic floor muscle function and hip function in women with SUI. So we can't be tunnel visioned about the pelvic floor muscles. We have to look holistically at what's happening. And in the long term, we perhaps need to look at this from the other angle as what's happening with people with hip impairments as far as their pelvic floor muscles. So that's, fodder for a future study, I hope.
So you can read the article to see more about why we hypothesize the unique differences are happening in women with and without stress urinary incontinence. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to the audience for tuning in.
We hope you enjoy the article.